Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about Booleans. And after this piece, if you didn't understand something that happened in the earlier lessons, then go back after this video and watch it again or run through the test and see if you understand what's going on after this explanation. So earlier we said that JavaScript was a weakly typed or dynamically typed coercive language. Now what that means is that JavaScript has two versions of false. One is false false, and the other one is what's called falsy. Likewise, there is true true and then truthy statements. And a truthy statement is a value that can coerce into being true, but it will fail a strict equality check. So here when we go to Booleans, we'll see how that works. So here we're going to throw in our debugger, and then we're going to run the code. And here I'm using typecasting to make sure everything is a Boolean. And when I run it, you'll see the debugger kick up right there. And the first statement, all these are going to be equal to true true, and so all of them are going to pass. The next way, so a lot of people don't like this sort of longer version of typecasting. I like it because it's very explicit and obvious what's about to happen. But they'll use this not language construct. And what this does is it says first convert it to false, which means it'll convert it to a Boolean, then convert it to the opposite of false, which is whatever the original value would have been if it's a Boolean. I personally don't like it because it's not explicit and it's kind of weird, but this and the above statement are functionally equivalent. So doing this, we can see that one is going to be considered true and an empty object is going to be considered true. Of course, as the next test will show you, it'll think that X is truthy. You can see that test right here. And so you can understand what truthy means, it means if I say 1 equals true like that with the double equal sign, that is a truthy value. If I do this, however, a strict equality check, that's going to be false. That's actually true. This comes into play a lot with if statements. So I can say if 1 console.log 1 is considered truthy. And sure enough, that statement runs just fine. So anything that passed in through there is going to run. Now a value that's considered falsy is 0. So if I run that one, we'll see that there is no statement there because the 0 is false, so it skips over the entire block of code right here and it doesn't run it. So as we just saw, X is coercible, so X is going to, whenever X is set equal to 1, that's going to pass the truthy check. Likewise, a string that isn't empty is going to be coercible to true, so that test is going to pass. Likewise, an object, even if it's completely empty, is still going to pass that check. An empty function is also going to pass, which we would expect that because an object pass. And then finally, an empty array is also going to pass. And that's potentially unexpected. So sometimes you'll have to do this check right here, which says if there is a length to it. Which of course there is no length to an empty array, so that's going to fail. Although if we had passed that in as a empty array, it would have passed. So then we're going to look at the falsy values. And of course, false is falsy. More important than that is 0 is falsy. And that's why this dot length check works, because the dot length of an empty array is just going to be 0. And the most common use case for this is empty string. So if someone fills out a form and they don't put anything there, it's going to pass in an empty string, and we expect that to be false. So next up is going to be how null or undefined are used. This is just a very quick check. And that's going to be located right here instead of undefined or null. And we'll throw our debugger there just to get it up and running. Now when we run that code, we're saying that we expect null equal undefined to be true. So on a strict or excuse me, on a weak equality check, null is equal to undefined, and this is the one exception to what's considered best practice. It's generally considered a bad practice to do stuff like this. The reason being is that this right here is kind of hard to understand, or especially something like that. If you want to do this exact check, you can just do this. That works exactly the same. Or you can throw the unary negation operator, or the bang, or the exclamation point, which now changes the value of it. So it was false, but by putting the negation operator, it now converts it into true. Since this is the one time where a strict equality check is considered bad, if null equals undefined is one of the few times where it's considered okay or even best practice to use a weak equality check inside of an if statement. So that's a rundown of how Booleans work. They're basically a value that whenever you pass in, they're either going to evaluate either true or false.